Have this little Hillclimb starlet back in again. Today we're going to be looking at the front suspension, see can we dial it in a little bit better. So the car used to be a rallycross car and it was built sort of to be much higher, and now that it's lowered for rallycross it sort of has a lot of bump steer now in the car, so we're going to try and see can we dial out some of the bump steer.
So these are the corner weights of the car when I first got it.
Pretty sure that says 350 pound, it's sort of hard to see. So what we're going to do is we're going to put the shock back into the car and go through the wheel motion. So I'll just measure how much the damper compresses versus how much the wheel moves to get the motion ratio of the suspension. So once I work out the motion ratio, I'm going to weigh all the unsprung mass here that's hanging down. I'm going to weigh all that, and then I can work out the frequency of the front suspension. Okay, so I'm just going through the motion ratio and I'm at, from the wheel hub to the line I've marked, I'm at 350 mil. Normal ride height is 365 mil, so I'm only in 15 mil compression compared to normal ride height. And I'm getting sort of some weird binding. I'm actually, the wheel, like there's no spring on the damper. There's still 60 mil of travel left on the shock, but I'm getting binding now. So if I try to lift this wheel up, like there should be nothing stopping this wheel going all the way up till it hits something. I'm starting to lift the car, not lift the wheel. So the customer said he thinks the front of the car is very stiff. The springs don't seem that stiff, but this car was designed to be a rallycross car, which was like had loads of travel and it was really high off the ground. It's been lowered so much now, so that's where we're getting funny bumps there and some sort of binding by the feels of it. Something is not right. I think we maybe have a bent shock or something. So it's going jumping up. I'd say the shock's bent. Wheel stuck. Okay, so that's as low as it'll go. From where I was measuring on the wheel, it's 310 mil up to the mark on the arch I have, which is giving the car 50 mil of bump travel. The last 30 mil, maybe even the 50 mil that it's operating at, that damper was definitely not happy to be compressed. The last 10 mil of the damper can't be used. It's actually lifting the car up. The car's not even sitting on the blocks anymore. It's completely lifted up. And the reason why is this tension strut is actually fouling on the body there. Before I do anything more to the geometry of the car, I'm going to take that shock out, measure it up, see which one it is, and order 2 new inserts. Seems okay. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to take all this off. I plan on moving this lower arm up a hole anyway. This compression strut here is actually just fouling just here on the chassis. So I'm going to take all this off out of my way. I'm going to cut this up here, plate it back in again to give this a little bit more room. And I'm also going to move this up 30 or 40 mil. I could do it actually moving this up 30-40 mil as well, but that's a lot of work. See, all these brackets and spaces were put in were to get the car up originally. Okay, so there's nothing wrong with the shock itself, and it's working fine down to here. But if I push it past there, it's getting stuck. I actually think what's wrong is I think the strut is bent. The very end of the strut is bent. So it's 18.5 kilos for the upright and the brakes and everything. The wheel weighs... That's the wheel, and that's the brakes and the shocks and the upright. Alright, so I've calculated the hertz of the front suspension. It's actually quite surprising. It's 2.83, which is quite stiff. Too stiff, to be fair. I was hoping to have it around 2 hertz, which I actually need to change. So the front springs are 350 pounds. 180 pounds brings it down to 2 hertz. That's surprising. So we can go half as stiff on the spring on the front, which should be a step in the right direction. How I worked all that out is you have to get corner weights, then the unsprung mass, the spring rate you have, or you can just work it out if you don't have it, the motion ratio of the wheel, then I just put it into an online calculator and it spits out what I need to know. And then you can change anything you want, like unsprung mass, barely changes it. The weight of the vehicle is probably the big one. Work it into hertz is good for trying to figure out where to go with your spring rates. So when I get it into hertz and we're at 2.83, I know that's too stiff. Like 2 is good for a saloon car, 3 is good for a single seater. Starting off anyway, like a road car is like 1.2 to 1.4 or 5. So we're double the stiffness of a road car on the front. No, everything's good on this side. No markings on the springs, so I don't know what rate springs these are. So I can weigh the rear axle on its own. 94 kilos. That's without the wheels, so I have to add the wheels onto that. Alright, so I can't see it on these to say what spring rate they are, so I'm going to measure them the best I can. But from working it out, if I had 180 pounds in the rear, I'd have 1.95 frequency, and at 180s in the front I'd have 2.03, so 180s all round is sort of what I want. One problem we might have is, so this is the rear shock, and it's quite soft, which is what you expect. Probably has a 200 pound spring or 220 pound spring is what I measured at, and that's probably valved to deal with that, so that's probably about okay. But the front is probably twice as stiff in valving. Like, I can't do it with one hand. So with this car having 50-50 weight balance and the spring rates we want to run are going to be very similar front to back, the two dampers are completely different. So even if I get the spring rates right, now our dampening's going to be wrong. Ideally, that's where you start going down the road of custom shocks. You talk to Ben and Ray Shocks. So if the wheel's back on the car and the shock's back in it, but there's no springs in them, I'm going to compress the car the whole way through its suspension travel, make sure it's not binding on anything or hitting anything, and see what sort of suspension travel we have before we hit bump stops or hit something else, I suppose. Right, that's about normal ride height now. We're on the bump stops already. Right, so them shocks are way too long for this. The bump stop is very much compressed at the ride height that this car was set up at. Okay. So the link bars on the top of the axle, there's only about 5mm clearance on them link bars, and we're on the bump stops, and the bump stops are half compressed already, I'd say. So there's about another 15mm before the shock's completely bottomed out. But before the shock's going to bottom out, the top links are hitting the chassis. I'm going to have to run that car a lot higher than it was to get suspension travel in the rear. It's sort of, it was built for rallycross being high, so without changing where everything mounts, when we try to lower it too much, we're just binding everything up. So this rear shock is 590mm long when it's in the car, but at ride height it's only 435, so there's 150mm not being used, compressed the whole time. So if I was going to get new rear shocks, ideally I'd want something at least 100mm shorter.
And that's what we decided to look into. We can get custom shocks made the right length, right valve and the right spring rate. But we're just going to sort out the bump steer and the new spring rates and the ride heights for now.
When I'm waiting on parts for the suspension, I just want to have a look at the brakes. The customer's saying the brakes are a little bit spongy. Just to test it out, what I'm going to do is I'm going to disconnect the handbrake and just join the hydraulic pipes together, and we'll go for a test. So I've joined this pipe straight through, so the handbrake isn't in use anymore. Still have a bit of a soft brake pedal, and I don't know if you can see from there, but the master cylinder that's going to the rear brakes is moving quite a lot, where the front brakes isn't really. I can actually compress the master cylinder on the rear with my hand, and the front is solid. I still have a pretty spongy pedal on the rear circuit. So I have actually a new 0.7 cylinder, same as what's in that 0.7. So I'm going to put a new cylinder in it, and hopefully that fixes it. I might need a bigger cylinder on the rear. It actually has front calipers on the rear, and they're quite big, so I might get enough fluid going to the rear, big single calipers. So the bias bar is maxing out, and the rears aren't locking up, so I can't even apply pressure to the front brakes because the rears are just pivoting out of the way. Okay, so I've put a 1-inch master cylinder in on the rear brakes, and now the pedal is much firmer and both pistons are sort of travelling the same distance before it gets stiff, and I can actually adjust the bias bar now a little, which one has the most force, where before it wasn't. Made the rear master cylinder bigger, so more fluid will go to the back, but you'll have less pressure, and we should be able to apply more pedal pressure now because the rears won't be locking up. Hopefully that'll help the balance of the car under the brakes, and we'll get the front to work slightly better. When I'm waiting on parts for the suspension, I just want to check the diff out in this car. The customer doesn't know what diff it is, or what diff ratio it is, or how tight the diff is, or anything really to do with the diff. When you're moving it around outside, it seems like it sort of locks quite easy. I have the other side of the axle locked up, so I can just twist this side and see how tight it is. But I can already tell it's not tight at all. So this probably isn't the most accurate way to test this, but at least it puts a number on it. 15 foot-pounds, which is about 20 newton meters. 20 newtons is quite soft on the preload, but then it does feel like it locks a little bit when you're out in the stones. So I might just take the back cover off and have a look and see what the ramp angles are. Maybe there's tight ramp angles in it. And so it could have soft preload, but 30-degree ramp angles or 45-degree ramp angles. Maybe we can swap them around to 70-degree. And I'll make it a bit softer on not as locky. What I'm going to do is I'm going to pull the back cover off and have a look inside and see what sort of diff it is. Might be able to tell, but It could be like a gear type diff, like an ATB, and that would explain why it's so loose. The 6th, 2011. It's a 4.6 diff because it's written on it right there. And it is a plated diff. All the teeth and gears look good. I'll ring the customer and see what he wants to do. It's starting to slip at about 20 Newton meters, so it is a bit worn. I don't have a rebuild kit for the minute, so we're just going to put the cover back on, and that'll be next project down the road. Probably rebuild the diff, tighten it up a little bit. Don't want it too tight for hill climbing. Okay, so new parts come in. I got a new strut, I got new springs as well. I also this compression strut here. I'm gonna be lowering the car. Well, actually, I'm gonna be making the front of the car slightly higher and the back of the car. But I'm gonna change this lower control arm up so it's gonna match the steering rack. Hopefully, fix some of the bumps there. And this compression strut here as well. Where this mounts on, I'm going to move that up about 50 mil. We actually got new compression struts. So I'm going to have to cut these old brackets off, weld new brackets on, move all this sort of suspension point, inner points up, maybe 50 mil, 40 mil. Ideally we want to run shorter struts, and there is shorter struts available. Just a little bit out of our budget at the minute, but it'll be further down the pipeline. So at the minute we're just going to run the car slightly higher than we want, on the spring rates we want. It's what we have for now, so we'll stick with that for now. The very end of these lugs are all ground off, so I'm just going to grab a grinder, take the corner off this. Just took the corner off that a little bit. It already was sort of ground down a little bit, but was just touching. Okay, to help with the bump steer, I'm going to move this lower control arm from here to up here. This point is going to be pivoting at the same position as the steering rack, and try to get the two of these to go up and down in the same arc, because at the minute they're like at mad different arcs, and that's what's causing the bump steer. But if I'm moving all this up, I'm going to have to move this compression arm up as well, because if I leave that down below and move everything up, I'm going to upset the, not the bump steer, what's the other thing? Oh, it's 10:30 at night. Anti-dive. So if I leave this down here, I'm going to have probably pro dive, not anti-dive, So what I want to do is move this up 50 mil. I want to move this up 50 mil as well. That's why we got a new kit. The two sides are different anyway, so we decided to change them out so they're about the same both sides. And actually on a hill climb car like this, I could probably do moving this up slightly more to get a little bit more anti-dive on the front of the car. We'll go with keeping it the same for the minute. I suppose we can always come back and change it another time, although anti-dive is not really something. The reason you'd want some anti-dive is if you have really soft springs and you slam on the brakes, the whole car will lean forward, possibly too much. So you can put some anti-dive in it and the car won't tip forward quite as much. But if you're on a really bumpy road, that's sort of like locking up your suspension. So you're putting soft springs in because you're on a bumpy road, but the anti-dive is stopping your suspension from working. So I think what I'm going to do now is I'm going to cut all this off, move this up, and then find the proper location to fit this in. And this tension strut had like a 50 mil box or a 40 mil box welded here, so I've cut all that off and cleaned it. And that's going to go there like that. Probably in the future, what I would probably try do in the future would be to move this bracket outside here and have 3 or 4 different holes so we can change anti-dive. The 2 compression rod brackets welded on are level with the subframe. The ones that I cut off actually weren't level with the subframe. One was down about 15 mil more than the other, and you'll see the reason why now. So that's where the bracket needs to be. There's a lot of damage here to the chassis leg. It's been all plated up the back and sort of compressed all here. This is where I need the rose joint to be in space, I suppose, but it's a bit gappy everywhere. So I can only get like an inch weld here, and I can weld along the back. I'm gonna have to plate all this up here to get it in the right location to straighten it up, but that's where I want it, so it's in the right place. I have the coilovers at the rear. I was going to adjust these up and leave the standard springs on them. But the reason I took it back out was I was trying to adjust the platform. It was real stiff, so I had to clean all this. So now I can adjust it nice and easy because I'm going to have to corner weight this car. I'm going to be adjusting these up and down, so it was a bit seized. So, but I'm going to use the springs that were already in the rear then, and there's no, I can't tell what spring rate they are. I guess they're around 220. So I'm just going to check it on the scales there and see what it comes out at. So this is another bit of a crude operation. I'm just going to preload the spring and then compress it 1 inch and see how many pounds force it is. As simple as that. So the first inch I went, we got 90.5 kilos. So I'm just going to do another inch just to make sure that's okay. That's 2 inches and it was 180 kilos, so if I convert that to pounds. So that was the rear spring and it worked out at 198 pounds per inch. I did it a second time and I came out with 102 pounds, so fairly confident that's a 200 pound spring. I got new ones for the front, but they're only 180s, 185s, so I'm just going to test them and see how close to 185 I get. Just compressed this spring 1 inch and got 84 kilos, which is 185 pounds, which is exactly what it says on it. So I'm fairly confident that doing that works. This will be the first time I'm dropping it down to see what the bump steer looks like. So this is the ride height I'm going to be running at the rear. It looks crazy high, but the arch is actually cut flush with the top of the tub. So that's the top of the tub just there. So that's the maximum wheel travel, which the wheel can't really hit the tubs, I don't think. I think it'll bottom out on the bump stops first. So if you look in above the rear wheel, you can just barely see the bump stop there, and that's top of the damper here. So we've only 50 mil of travel before we hit the bump stop. Now we can compress the bump stop another 30 mil. So that's about 70 mil on bump, but given the space we have here, you would think we have tons of wheel movement, but we don't, because this rear shock is so long. Now we can modify the rear axle and still use this shock and get that shock down lower, but it's probably not the right shock to be using anyway, because it's not set up for the 50-50 weight balance of this car. So if we're going down that road, we're just better off getting new shocks. So the rear ride height was from the centre of the wheel to where I marked the arch was about 400 mil when I got the car. It's at 480 now, so I've raised it up 80 mil. You've seen underneath that it was only about 50 or 60 mil from the bump stop. So when the car came in here, it was actually sitting on the bump stop compressing. The spring was barely doing any work, it was all the bump stop. So that should make a big difference in the back. Still the same spring rates in the back, but the springs are actually going to work. And the front, so the front was at 360 mil from the arch to the centre of the hub, and I'm running that now at 410. So 50 mil higher. It was about 10 mil from the bump stop, maybe 15 mil, and now it has 50 mil before it hits the bump stop. Much softer spring. We're going from 350 to 185. But when I work out the hertz, that's going from 2.8 hertz to 2 hertz, 2.1 maybe on the front, and on the rear we're around 2 hertz as well. So the car is going to be balanced with spring rates front to rear. But I'm just going to do the corner weights now and make sure everything's alright, and sort of finish up the last bit of the setup. Okay, so what that shows is that this tyre and the opposite rear corner tyre are two heaviest tyres. So the car's braking, it's going to be dipping on this side, nearly, just a little bit too far. Okay, I think that's it. So these are the corner weights I settled on. You see here the left rear and the right front equals 532 kilos, and the left front and the rear right equals 533. So I'm only 1 kilo out on the cross weights. And the cross weights is pretty much all you need to worry about, to be fair. Like you can see on the right hand side of the car, this is the right hand side of the car, the front is 276 and the rear is 281, which is a lot heavier than this side. But if you work it out in percentage, so the front is 49.5% and the rear is 50.5%. That's of the total weight. This is the total weight here. So it's almost a 50-50 split. And if you work out all the weights on the left, the rear is 1% heavier than the front on that side, and the same on the right hand side, the rear is 1% heavier than the front. So the percentage is still the same on both sides, even though they're different numbers. But then when you add the cross weights together, they're almost equal.